235. Jataka. Houses in the world are sweet, etc. This story the master told at Jetavana monastery, about Roger the Malian. We learn that this man, who was a lay friend of Ananda's, sent the elder monk a message that he should come to him. The elder monk took leave of the master, and went. He served the elder monk with all sorts of food, and sat down on one side, engaging him in a pleasant conversation. Then he offered the elder monk a share of his house, tempting him by the 5 channels of desire. Ananda, sir, I have at home great store of live and dead stock. I will divide it and give you half. Let us live in one house together. The elder monk explained to him the suffering which is involved in desire. Then rose from his seat, and returned to the monastery. When the master asked whether he had seen Roger, he replied that he had. What did he say to you? Sir, Roger invited me to return to the world. Then I explained to him the suffering involved in desires and the worldly life. The master said, Ananda, this is not the first time that Roger the Malian has invited hermits to return to the world. He did the same before. And then, at his request, he told a story of the olden time. Once upon a time, when Brahmadatta was king of Benares, the Bodhisattva was one of a family of Brahmins who lived in a certain market town. Coming to years, he took up the religious life, and lived for a long time amid the Himalayas. He went to Benares to purchase salt and spices, and dwelling in the king's grounds. Next day he entered Benares. Now a certain rich man of the place, pleased at his behavior, took him home, gave him to eat, and receiving his promise to abide with him, caused him to dwell in the garden and attended to his wants. And they conceived a friendship each for the other. One day, the rich man, by reason of his love and friendship for the Bodhisattva, thought this within himself. The life of an ascetic is unhappy. I will persuade my friend Vakanaka to loose himself. I will part my wealth in 2, and give half to him, and we both will dwell together. So one day, when the meal was done, he spoke sweetly to his friend and said, Good Vakanaka, unhappy is the hermit's life. It is pleasant to live in a house. Come now, let us both together, live as we will. So saying, he uttered the first stanza. Houses in the world are sweet, full of food, and full of treasure. There you have your fill of meat eating, drinking at your pleasure. The Bodhisattva on hearing him, thus replied. Good sir, from ignorance you have become greedy in desire, and call the householder's life good, and the life of the ascetic bad. Listen now, and I will tell you how bad is the householder's life. And he uttered the second stanza. He that has houses peace can never know, he lies and cheats, he must deal many a blow on others' shoulders. Nothing this fault can cure. Then who into a house would willing go? With these words the great Buddha told the defects of a householder's life, and went into the garden again. When the master had ended this discourse, he identified the birth. Roger the Malian was the Benares merchant, and I was Vakanaka the monk. Jataka number 236. Jataka. See that twice-born bird, etc. This story the master told while staying in Jetavana monastery, about a hypocrite. When he was brought before the master said, Brethren, he was a hypocrite of old just as he is now, and told the following story. Once upon a time, when Brahmadatta was king of Benares, the Bodhisattva became a fish in a certain pond in the Himalaya region, and a great shoal went with him. Now a crane desired to eat the fish. So in a place near the pond he drooped his head, and spread out his wings, and looked vacantly at the fish, waiting till they were off the guard. At the same moment the Bodhisattva with his shoal came to that place in search of food. And the shoal of fish on seeing the crane uttered the first stanza. See that twice-born bird, how white, like a water lily seeming. Wings outspread to left and right, oh, how pious. dreaming, dreaming. Then the bodhisattva looked, and uttered the second stanza. What he is you do not know, or you would not sing his praises. He is our most treacherous rival. That is why no wing he raises. Upon that the fish splashed in the water and drove the crane away. When this discourse was ended, the master identified the birth. This hypocrite was the crane, and I was the chief of the shoal of fish. Footnotes. A crane's sleep is an Indian proverb for trickery. Dijo is used of a bird as born in the egg and from the egg. It is also applied to Brahmins, and so conveys an additional notion of piety. The high caste in India were originally fair, having originated from Europe and then migrated thousands of years back. The word twice born is used for these high caste people as those who after the religious ceremony of thread were considered as born again into purity. Jataka number 237. Siketa Jataka. Why are hearts cold, etc. This story the master told during a stay near Siketa, about a Brahmin named Siketa. Both the circumstances that suggested the story and the story itself have already been given earlier. And when the Tathagata had gone to the monastery, the brother asked, "How, sir, did the love begin?" and repeated the first stanza. Why are hearts cold to one, O Buddha, tell? And love another so exceeding well? The master explained the nature of love by the second stanza. Those love they who in other lives were dear, as sure as grows the lotus in the mere. After this discourse was ended, the master identified the birth. These two people were the Brahmin and his wife in the story. And I was their son. Jataka number 238. Ekapada Jataka. Tell me one word, etc. This story the master told in Jetavana monastery, about a certain landowner. We are told that there was a landowner who lived at Shravasti city. One day, his son sitting on his hip asked him what is called the door question. He replied, "That question requires a Buddha. Nobody else can answer it." So he took his son to Jetavana monastery, and saluted the master. "Sir," said he, "as my son sat on my hip, he asked me the question called the door. I didn't know the answer, so here I am to ask you to give it." Said the master, "This is not the first time, layman, that the boy has been a seeker after the way to accomplish his ends, and asked wise men this question. He did so before, and wise men in olden days gave him the answer. But by reason of the dimness caused by rebirth, he has forgotten it." And at his request the master told a tale of the olden time. Once upon a time, when Brahmadatta was reigning in Benares, the bodhisattva came into this world as a rich merchant's son. He grew up, and when in course of time the father died, he took his father's place as a merchant. And his son, a young boy, sitting on his hip, asked him a question. "Father," said he, "tell me a thing in one word which embraces a wide range of meaning." And he repeated the first stanza. "Tell me one word that all things comprehends. By what, in short, can we attain our ends?" His father replied with the second. "One thing for all things precious, that is skill. Add virtue and add patience, and you will do good to friends and to your rivals do ill." Thus did the bodhisattva answer his son's question. The son used the way which his father pointed out to accomplish his purposes, and in due course he passed away to fare according to his deeds. When this discourse was ended, the master explained the truths and identified the birth. At the conclusion of the truths, father and son reached the fruit of the first path. This man was then the son, and I was the merchant of Benares myself. Jataka number 239. Harita Mata Jataka. When I was in their cage, etc. This story the master told while living in the bamboo grove, about Ajatashatru. Maha Kosala, the king of Kosala's father, when he married his daughter to King Bimbisara, had given her a village in Kasi for bath money. After Ajatashatru murdered Bimbisara, his father, the queen very soon died of love for him. Even after his mother's death, Ajatashatru still enjoyed the revenues of this village. But the king of Kosala determined that no father killer should have a village which was his by right of inheritance, and made war upon him. Sometimes the uncle got the best of it, and sometimes the nephew. And when Ajatashatru was victor, he raised his banner and marched through the country back to his capital in triumph. But when he lost, all downcast he returned without letting anyone know. It happened on a day that the brethren sat talking about it in the Hall of Truth. Friend, so one would say, Ajatashatru is delighted when he beats his uncle, and when he loses he is thrown down. The master, entering the hall, asked what they were discussing this time. And they told him. He said, Brethren, this is not the first time that the man has been happy when he conquered, and miserable when he did not. And he told him an old world tale. Once upon a time, when Brahmadatta was king of Benares, the bodhisattva became a green frog. At the time people set wicker cages in all pits and holes of the rivers, to catch fish with. In one cage were a large number of fish. And a water snake, eating fish, went into the trap himself. A number of the fish crowding together fell to biting him, until he was covered with blood. Seeing no help for it, in fear of his life he slipped out of the mouth of the cage, and lay down full of pain on the edge of the water. At the same moment, the green frog took a leap and fell into the mouth of the trap. The snake, not knowing to whom he could appeal, asked the frog that he saw there in the trap, Friend frog, are you pleased with the behavior of the fish? And he uttered the first stanza. When I was in their cage, the fish did bite me, though a snake. Green frog, does that seem right? Then the frog answered him, Yes, friend snake, it does. Why not? If you eat fish which get into your area, the fish eat you when you get into theirs. In his own place, and district, and feeding ground no one is weak. So saying, he uttered the second stanza. Men rob as long as they can compass it. And when they cannot, why, the biters bit. The bodhisattva having pronounced his opinion, all the fish observing the snake's weakness, cried, Let us seize our rival. And came out of the cage, and did him to death then and there, and then departed. When the master had ended this discourse, he identified the birth. Ajatashatru was the water snake, and the green frog was I. JATAKA number 240. Mahapingala JATAKA. The Yellow King, etc. This story the master told at the Jetavana monastery park, about Devadatta the heretic. Devadatta for 9 months had tried to compass the destruction of the future Buddha, and had sunk down into the earth by the gateway of Jetavana monastery. Then they that lived at Jetavana monastery and in all the country round about were delighted, saying, Devadatta the enemy of Buddha has been swallowed up in the earth. The adversary is killed, and the master has become perfectly enlightened. And hearing these words spoken many a time and often, the people of all the continent of India, and all the goblins, and living creatures, and gods were delighted also. One day, all the brethren were talking together in the Hall of Truth, and thus would they say. Brother, since Devadatta sank into the earth, what a number of people are glad, saying, Devadatta is swallowed up by the earth. The teacher entered, and asked, What are you all talking about here, brethren? They told him. Then said he, This is not the first time, O brethren, that lots have rejoiced and laughed aloud at the death of Devadatta. Long ago they rejoiced and laughed as they do now. And he told him an old world tale. Once upon a time reigned at Benares a wicked and unjust king named Mahapingala, the great Yellow King, who did sinfully after his own will and pleasure. With taxes and fines, and many mutilations and robberies, he crushed the folk as it were sugar cane in a mill. B was cruel, fierce, ferocious. For other people he had not a grain of pity. At home he was harsh and unsatisfiable towards his wives, his sons and daughters, to his Brahmin courtiers and the householders of the country. He was like a speck of dust that falls in the eye, like gravel in the broth, like a thorn sticking in the heel. Now the Bodhisattva was a son of King Maha Pingala. After this king had reigned for a long time, he died. When he died, all the citizens of Benares were overjoyed and laughed a great laugh. They burnt his body with 1,000 cartloads of logs, and quenched the place of burning with thousands of jars of water, and appointed the Bodhisattva to be king. They caused a drum of rejoicing to beat about the streets, for joy that they had got them a righteous king. They raised flags and banners, and decorated the city. At every door was set a pavilion, and scattering parched corn and flowers, they sat him down upon the decorated platforms under fine canopies, and did eat and drink. The Bodhisattva himself sat upon a fine divan on a great raised dais, in great magnificence, with a white umbrella stretched above him. The courtiers and householders, the citizens and the doorkeepers stood around their king. But one doorkeeper, standing not far from the king, was sighing and sobbing. "Good porter," said the Bodhisattva, observing him, "all the people are making merry for joy that my father is dead, but you stand weeping. Come, was my father good and kind to you?" And with the question he uttered the first stanza. The Yellow King was cruel to all men. Now he is dead, all freely breathe again. Was he, the yellow-eyed, so very dear? Or, porter, why do you stand weeping here? The man heard, and answered, I am not weeping for sorrow that Pingala is dead. My head would be glad enough. For King Pingala, every time he came down from the palace, or went up into it, would give me 8 blows over the head with his fist, like the blows of a blacksmith's hammer. So when he goes down to the other world, he will deal 8 blows on the head of Yama, the gatekeeper of hell, as though he were striking me. Then the people there will cry, he is too cruel for us, and will send him up again. And I fear he will come and deal fisticuffs on my head again, and that is why I weep. To explain the matter he uttered the second stanza. The Yellow King was anything but dear. It is his coming back again I fear. What if he beat the King of Death, and then the King of Death should send him back again? Then said the Bodhisattva, that king has been burnt with 1,000 cartloads of wood. The place of his burning has been soaked with water from thousands of pitchers, and the ground has been dug up all round. Beings that have gone to the other world, except by force of fate, do not return to the same bodily shape as they had before. Do not be afraid. And to comfort him, he repeated the following stanza. Thousands of loads of wood have burnt him quite, thousands of pitchers quenched what still did burn. The earth is dug about to left and right, fear not, the king will never more return. After that, the porter took comfort. And the Bodhisattva ruled in righteousness. And after giving gifts and doing other good acts, he passed away to fare according to his deeds. When the master had ended this discourse, he identified the birth. Devadatta was Pingala, and his son was I myself.